I want to begin this morning with a text from the Scripture. From the book of Isaiah, chapter 63, verse 7, which says, I will tell of the kindnesses of the Lord, the deeds for which he is to be praised, according to all the Lord has done for us. Yes, the many good things he has done for the house of Israel. Not because they deserved it, but according to his compassion and many kindnesses. We have a compassionate, caring, and loving God. And he has done much for his people as he said he would. And today we are celebrating what he has done. And I'm asking the question this morning, as we think about the modern state of Israel, is it a biblical miracle, or is it just kind of a coincidence historically? Just the things kind of worked out, and here we are, and now we have a state of Israel. Well, there's another text in the book of Isaiah at the very, very end, the last chapter of Isaiah, chapter 66, beginning at verse 7, which says, before she was in labor, she gave birth. Now think about that. Before she was in labor. Before her pain came, she delivered a male child. How amazing is that? Who has heard of such a thing? Who has seen such things? Can you imagine? Giving birth, I mean, women here, many of you have given birth, and I can't imagine what that's like. Well, I can, actually. I was there for 3 of them as my wife gave birth, but, I was still not quite as close to everything as she was, but I was there. And it was an amazing time. But how God has designed all that is truly remarkable. The text goes on to say and ask this question: can a land be born in one day? Can you imagine a woman giving birth without any pain? Can you imagine that happening? Can a land be born in one day? Can a nation be brought forth all at once? It would have to be a miracle for that to happen, for any of these things to happen. So in a sense, I've answered the question. Now we can close in prayer and continue on, right? Get right to the food. Now I want to look at that, and I want to look at 2 aspects of that today. And I want to begin at the beginning of what I think of as the modern state of Israel. Back on November 26, 1947. Now, some of you can't remember that because you were too young or you weren't even here at that time. I was here at that time, I have to admit, but I don't remember it because I was pretty young. This is what was going on. On that date, back in 1947, there was an organization called the United Nations. Maybe you've heard of it. Yeah, I know. We won't go into all of that. But it met at that time, didn't have the building that it has now. It met at a place called Flushing Meadow Park, and you can see what that looked like. There's a building in the background. It was actually a leftover from the 1939 World's Fair that was held in New York. One of the buildings was preserved and used was vacant at the time, so the United Nations moved into that building. And that was a building, I lived a short distance away from this. My high school was almost inside of this. It was, I actually went ice skating in that building before the UN. Probably should have kept it as an ice rink. Anyway. But this is where they met. And it was on that date, November 26, 1947, when they had a special meeting, which actually had started a number of days before. But the meeting was devoted to the question of what to do with Palestine. I have trouble with that name. Palestine. They called the meeting the partition of Palestine. That was the item on the agenda. They were about to divide that land into a Jewish and an Arab area. At that time, there were 57 member nations in the United Nations. It's much smaller than it is today. But as it turned out, only 46 of those 57 member nations actually cast yes or no votes. You see, Israel they were hanging by a thread, wondering if they were going to get approval for a land. And there's a wonderful story that I will not go into the details of that started just several days before. This was actually on a Saturday, on the 26th of November was a Saturday. Why? Because it was supposed to happen actually on Wednesday of that week, but the leaders of Israel, of those who were in favor of getting this passed, recognized that the vote was too close. So they asked for a delay. They got it. And in a few days that followed, they managed to turn a few votes in favor. They needed 2/3 of whoever voted to vote in favor. If you don't get 2/3, the amendment would have been rejected. Out of the 46, 2/3 will be 31. They needed 31 votes, and they were not sure up to the very moment that they took the vote. At 5 p.m. on that afternoon, that late Saturday afternoon, they finally called the organization to order, and they began to take the votes. One of the nations was absent, so they certainly didn't vote. 10 of the nations who were present abstained. One of them, by the way, was Great Britain. 13 other nations voted no, but 33 voted yes. And that was 2 more than they absolutely had to have. And when that happened, people in Israel who were sitting by their radios, they didn't have TV in those days here, weren't quite there yet, were counting votes on their piece, and they were just absolutely delirious with joy, as you can imagine, having waited 2,000 years and not had a country, not had a place to run when people were threatening their lives. At the time of the Holocaust, they had no place to go. There was no Israel. There was no place to go, and places wouldn't take them. Even the United States would not take them. Oh, what a mess. But on this day, at a little after 5, November 26th, Israel became a nation. Yes, a land can be born in a day. It's exactly what happened. So today I want to consider 2 special days that are now on the modern Israeli calendar. 2 special days, not just one. You think, well, aren't we going to rejoice and delight in Yom Ha'atzmaut? Yes, we are. And in fact, but there are 2 days. I'm going to start with I'm just mentioning the second one of the 2, but we're going to take them in chronological order as I look through them this morning. The first one, Yom Ha'atzmaut, and it is pronounced Yom. You see it Y-O-M. Anybody here who says Yom? That's a word that means sea. Like you swim in the sea, or you jump in the sea, right? It's Yom. They should put an E at the end or a long marker over it. It's pronounced Yom in Hebrew. Yom Ha'atzmaut, not Maut, Maut. It means the day of independence. And on the Hebrew calendar, the day, November well, I'll come to that. Actually, it wasn't in November. The actual declaration of the date on which they came to declare the state of Israel was on the 5th of ER on the Hebrew calendar. That's why I guess our State Department, it was mentioned, is opening the U.S. Embassy on May 14th. You see, they didn't recognize that. Somebody in the State Department didn't recognize that Israel goes on the Hebrew calendar. And the 5th of ER moves around, as does the Passover and all our holidays. There's a lunar calendar. You and I here in the United States and a lot of the Western countries go by the Gregorian calendar. So May 14th is a month away. But they kind of missed that, I think, in the State Department. So if you want to correct them on it, probably a little too late as well. But okay, it means that, and the celebration is of the birth of the modern state of Israel, the one that is going to happen, and we'll show on May 14th. It was that year, the 5th of ER was the May 14th of 1948. This past Wednesday was the 5th of ER, which is why the celebration did occur in Israel this past week. And that makes, if you look at the Hebrew dates, 5708 from the day it was declared to be a state until today, that's exactly 70 years, which is why the state of Israel is now 70 years old. I know what that feels like. But that's okay. They keep going, and so do I. Yom HaZikaron is the other day I want to talk about. It means literally a day of remembrance. Zachar is to remember, a day of remembrance. And that was chosen as the day before Yom HaAtzmaut. The 4th of Iyar is specifically chosen by Israel. It is Israel's Memorial Day, honoring the fallen soldiers, those who have given their lives for the state of Israel. So let's start with that one and just review a little bit about Yom HaZikaron, because both of them happened this past week. The Yom HaZikaron was on Tuesday, and the Yom HaAtzmaut was on Wednesday. I want to review for you just very briefly, because I don't know that you all are familiar with it, or maybe have and have forgotten a little bit. All the attacks that have come against the state of Israel since they became a state on the 14th of May in 48. You see, the first attack came one day after the declaration of their state. Congratulations, you have a state, now get your rifles. Began on May 15th, 1948. They were attacked by 5 Arab states: Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq. Good morning. Now, there had been skirmishes well up to this time. From the time in the November date when they decided the UN did vote to partition it, the Jewish people rejoiced in that, but the Arab nations, the Palestinians and so on, who were there at that time, who called themselves that, were enraged. And they began skirmishes and set things on fire, and they were shooting at those Chalutzim, the Jewish people who were trying to settle in the land. And these 5 Arab states, by the way, were not the only countries that attacked Israel. They had help from some other Arab countries in the area. Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Sudan, and Morocco all sent soldiers to help support the attacks against this nascent state of Israel. Egypt, Syria, and Iraq all had air forces. These were legitimate countries, quote unquote, that had been in existence for quite a while. They had militaries, modern ones. Egypt and Syria had tanks. All of the countries had armies that were trained and ready to go. Well, maybe. They all had modern artillery. The Israeli defense, actually the word, the Israeli Haganah, it was called, which is a Hebrew word that means defense. they weren't quite as well equipped. We use the word defense, and you almost have to say, oh, you call that a defense? Listen to what they didn't have. They had no machine guns. They had no artillery. They had no tanks. They had no armored vehicles. They had no Air Force. I think there was a Cessna, as I recall, that actually started flying, and they had to open up the window to throw a thing out. That was the Air Force. It didn't stay that way. They didn't even have enough guns for the soldiers, the men and women who were committed to defending Israel at the time. They had about one gun for every 3 soldiers. Here, when is it my turn? They're shooting at me. Can I have the gun? No, you're not. I'm not done with it yet. We laugh. There was no laughing matter there. The British Foreign Ministry and the Central Intelligence Agency, our brain trust here in the United States, predicted, you know what? Arabs are going to wipe them out. They won't last for 2 weeks. They were quite sure of that when they saw the Arab reaction. And you know what? They were wrong. They were doing the very thing that most people in this world do. They look around to see who's got what, and then they decide who's going to win, but they don't look up. On May 26th, just less than 2 weeks after they started the war, and the war was brought to them, the Haganah actually, they realized the organization wasn't working, and they became the Israeli Defense Force, now known as the IDF. So they began within 2 weeks of the start of that attack. 10 months later, turned out in July of 1949, this is where it ended up. Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria all gave up and signed armistice with Israel. Iraq simply went home and refused to sign anything. Israel had won an unwinnable war. Without the Lord, it wouldn't have lasted 2 weeks. With God's finger on it, however, victory is assured. But there's a cost to pay. There is a cost. We'll come to that. After that, other wars in the years that followed, as you may or may not know, the Sinai War in 1956. Now, I remember that one well. I was in Hebrew school at that time, and we were following what was going on. That was against Egypt. Egypt thought it was time to rub out Israel. Gamal Abdel Nasser. We used to get our weekly magazine and news about Israel and so on. And there was more discussions of Nasser than I care to remember. The result of that was the demilitarization of the Sinai Peninsula, because that's for the place from which, one of the places from which Egypt attacked them. Basically, Israel won that war also. Then there was the famous Six-Day War. You've heard of that? Of course, the joke was Israel rented equipment for 6 days, so they got it over in 6 days, and that's why it only lasted 6. But that's not true. That was a war where Israel was watching Arab nations who were preparing this time. They were going to learn, having learned from these 2 previous wars against Israel, they were going to be ready for this. Nasser was leading the fight here. Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Iraq, those same wonderful nations at that time, they were back again, but this time they were going to do it right. They've learned, they thought. They learned. I don't know if you know this. It was the morning right before the nations were going to attack Israel that Israel learned through intercepting signals that the head of the Egyptian Air Force, the chief of the Egyptian Air Force, was going to fly around the Sinai and make sure all preparations were there, which would indicate probably they were going to attack within hours. But because he was in the air, they grounded all their fighter jets and bombers. They were all on the ground. What do you think Israel did? They said, you know what? Here's our chance. The Israeli Air Force, and there was an Air Force by then, took off in the wee hours of the morn, and they attacked every airport in Egypt. And they didn't just blow up the aircraft, the fighters and bombers that were on the runways. They blew up the runways too. So those that were hidden in hangars and other things couldn't get off the ground either. That was a time, you might say, Israel caught them with their pants down. And the results were absolutely, the world marveled at that. At the end of that, when they finally stopped, and Israel could have gone further, Israel had taken control of the entire Sinai. You know what the Sinai is? A big area, right? Just to the southwest of Israel. The entire Sinai. It's got a lot of oil in it, too. The Sinai was completely controlled by Israel. They controlled the West Bank. They controlled the Golan Heights, which Syria had controlled before. And they controlled the Gaza Strip, which had also been controlled by Egypt. They could have gone all the way to Cairo. They really were on the verge. They had the Egyptian Third Army surrounded. When the United Nations came in and said, stop! I don't know if they should have or not, but they did. They stopped and they and they just stayed put. They let the Third Army, the Egyptian Third Army, which they could have annihilated, they let them go home, back to their homes, walk home without their guns. That's the only thing. And all of their equipment, their artillery, their mortars, their vehicles and so on, their tanks, were left in the Sinai Desert. It was, you know what, it was such an amazing victory by Israel that it actually set them up for a failure. When things work that well for you, you become a little cocky, a little overconfident. And in fact, in 1973, it was Yom Kippur, Erev Yom Kippur. And Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Algeria, Morocco, and Saudi Arabia, and Cuba had all planned to attack Israel on Erev Yom Kippur. While many of the soldiers had returned home to go be with their families and observe the Yom Kippur and so on, there were a skeleton crew left at some of the places that were guarding in the Sinai. I know for a fact that when they started the attack, Israel was really caught just like the Egyptians and the others had been caught by Israel because they thought they would never do it. There was something called the Bar Lev line on the western portion of the Sinai there that Israel had control of, and they were all surprised when all of a sudden they were being shelled. Israel had to call up an emergency call-up of their troops back into service. I had a friend in my group at the engineering company I won't mention right now that I work for. I had two Israelis actually in my group. One of them was in one of the control towers in Beersheba, down in that area in the middle of Israel. And he remembers that night and the days that happened, that it came shortly thereafter. He remembers the panic on the part of the Israelis. I hear a phone ringing. If that's from the Lord, just put it on speaker so we can all hear. No, okay. So I remember speaking with him about his experiences in that 73 war. It was a scary moment for the Israelis. They really thought that this could be the end of the state of Israel. But once again, God came to their rescue. The result was an actual peace treaty, the first one signed between Israel and Egypt. And the Syrian in the north, there was an agreement to disengage. That's as far as Syria would go on that whole thing. We'll take it. In 1982, you remember the first Lebanon War. Now, you should start remembering some of these. The first Lebanon War that went on for a while. It was against the PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization, or so they called it. The Syria Hezbollah, the Lebanese National Resistance Front. Those were the group names of the people that were attacking Israel, mostly from the north. The result was the PLO was expelled from Lebanon. Israel had to send troops up north across into Lebanon. But there was never an Israeli-Lebanon treaty that was signed as a result of that war. Then began in the years that followed, in 1987, you remember the first of the series of intifadas. That went on for 6 years. It was against the Palestinian Authority, the PA, they call themselves, graduates of the PLO, and a group called Hamas. Hamas, of course, in Hebrew means violent. That's the name of their group, violent. Quite a group. The result was the famous Oslo Accord, which was a mutual recognition between the Palestine National Authority and they gained control of the West Bank and the Gaza. That was part of the agreement. Israel was trading land for peace. That'll work. Whose idea was that? Then the second intifada broke out when Ariel Sharon, I think it was, who made the one who was was the first one who wanted to go daven, had the nerve to go to the Kotel, the Wailing Wall, and it was a big tzimus, a kerfuffle that happened there against, broke out the second intifada, the Palestinian Authority again, and Hamas. The result was a big uprising by the Palestinians that had to be suppressed by the Israelis. Many on both sides, mostly in the Palestinians, lost their lives. Others were injured. The Second Lebanon War began in 2006, and that was against the Hezbollah. And the result was really a stalemate because Israel didn't want to do what it would take to remove Hezbollah. They were, I wish I had put this picture up now that I think about it. This picture of the two baby carriages. You ever seen this one? The two baby carriages? And it shows, an Arab soldier hiding behind one baby carriage with a gun, pointing at the Israeli on the other side, who is in front of the baby carriage, defending it. Great picture, says it all. Like, I think but Netanyahu was the one who said, when people said, just disarm, would you please? Everybody put down their arms. And Netanyahu said, You know, if Israel puts down their, well, the other way around, if the Palestinians and the Arabs put down their arms, there will be no war. If the Israelis put down their arms, there will be no Israel. He got it. Benjamin Netanyahu. The Gaza wars ensued, and they're still going on. Tunnel wars, digging tunnels to try to get around the Israeli guards and come up and do damage within Israel. That's why they they ended up building a wall, as you well know, because there were so many people, so many bad guys trying to come across into Israel. They built a wall which really did greatly reduce the number of terrorists that got into the nation of Israel. But that's been going on, and it continues. And you know, this very week you've seen pictures of the Palestinians rioting and in Gaza and setting tires on fire, which create a whole lot of smoke. And I just got to give Israel credit for this. Instead of going and shooting at them, they put a fan on to blow all the smoke back into Gaza. I thought that was so good. I don't know how well it worked, but that's what they did. Anyway, these are the attacks, some of the attacks against Israel. There's been many other skirmishes and shootings and things, all kinds of buses being blown up and people being sacrificed. In fact, I want you to understand a little bit more about the cost of all of those wars. So, Dale, if you wouldn't mind just dimming the lights for a moment, and I want you to watch this video. I don't know. it's tough to look at, but that's what Israel has gone through. The scripture in Isaiah 54 reminds us that no weapon formed against you, Israel, will prosper, and every tongue that accuses you in judgment, you will condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their vindication is from me, declares the Lord. Amen. Now I want to turn our attention, it's a little hard to do after all of that, but I wanted you to appreciate what Memorial Day is in Israel and why it is such a touching time, as it has been in our country, my gosh. A lot of us don't think much about Memorial Day. It's a day to go to the beach or have a barbecue and so on, but the sacrifices of our men and women should not be forgotten. Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day. Now, there was the announcement, as I said, of the beginning of the State of Israel on May 14th, 1948. And I would like you to I'd like to take you there, just briefly. It'll be a little more than 2 minutes. So if you wouldn't mind, again, and we'll have even one more of these short videos. But let's go back to that day in 1948.
ביום שישי, ה' באייר תש"ח, 14 במאי 1948, אחר הצהריים, באו המוזמנים אל בניין מוזיאון תל אביב בשדרות רוטשילד 16. הם התבקשו לשמור את סיבת ההזמנה, טקס הכרזת העצמאות, בסוד. אבל בבואם מצאו את חצי העיר ממתינה להם.
Some secret.
סמוך לשעה 4 הגיע דוד בן גוריון. כל חייו היו מסע אל הרגע הזה.
זוהי זכותו הטבעית של העם היהודי להיות ככל עם ועם עומד ברשות עצמו במדינתו הריבונית, אשר תפתח לרווחה את שערי המולדת לכל יהודי ותעניק לעם היהודי מעמד של אומה שוות זכויות בתוך העמים. לפיכך נתכנסנו אנו חברי מועצת העם, נציגי היישוב העברי והתנועה הציונית, ביום סיום המנדט הבריטי על ארץ ישראל. מתוקף זכותנו הטבעית וההיסטורית ועל יסוד החלטת עצרת האומות המאוחדות, אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל, היא מדינת ישראל. מתוך ביטחון בצור ישראל, הננו חותמים בחתימת ידינו לעדות על הכרזה זו.
I hope you noticed that in that comment. Due to the power of the State of Israel, we affix our names to that. And I did a little research on this, and the actual text, let me just share with you just a brief portion of the text that was in that he just read. Part of it, about in the middle of it, says this: accordingly, we, the members of the People's Council, representatives of the Jewish community of Eretz Israel and of the Zionist movement, are here assembled on the day of the termination of the British mandate over Eretz Israel, and by virtue of our natural and historic right, and on the strength of the resolution of the United Nations General Assembly, hereby declare the establishment of a Jewish state in Eretz Yisrael to be known as Medinat Yisrael, the State of Israel. That's when it was officially named. And this building is still there in Tel Aviv right now. There's quite a story on that. I won't take the time. But I want to share one more note of comment on the Ben Gurion's announcement on that date. This is what the text looked like that he was reading from. And I hope you can read that now. Anyway. No. Now, let me just show you a close-up, but that's probably not a whole lot better, but this is in 3 parts. The very last part of the document has at the bottom of it the signatures, the names, which are pretty hard to read there as well. But you look more closely, and there are some words here that jumped out at me. The words are these, translated into English: placing our trust in the Tzur Yisrael, in the rock of Israel, we affix our signatures to this proclamation. Somehow, despite all the giving of credit being given just to their own efforts, which were mighty and serious and well committed, and no question about that, but there was still, even in Ben Gurion and amongst those who were there, a recognition that there was more than that going on here, and still is. I have a list of accomplishments I wanted to share with you very briefly as we talk about what has Israel done now that they're 70 years old. They've done a lot. I'm going to go through this quickly, so don't take any notes. Yeah, I can give it to you if you want later. They became, when they declared their state, they became the first democratic and still the only democratic country in the Middle East. Israel has the highest percentage now of startup companies in the world. They are active, the second only to the U.S. in absolute terms of the numbers of startups. Israel has 61 companies on the NASDAQ. It's the technical exchange that it's more than Europe, Japan, Korea, and China combined. Now think about that. Here's Israel, and here are the rest of these countries. Israel has more on the NASDAQ. 93% of Israeli homes use solar energy for water heating, and that's the highest percentage in the world. 90% of Israel's wastewater is recycled. 90%. Of course, water is a real problem there. It's the highest percentage in the world. Spain is second with 20%. Israel now has 12 Nobel Prize winners. I won't take the time to list them all, just the categories. One who won in literature, 3 for the Nobel Peace Prize, 2 in economics, and 6 in chemistry. Nobel Prize winners in Israel. Amazing science capabilities in Israel. 1956, Israel's dairy industry produced the highest milk yield per cow in the world. Now that's important, but something's going on there with their cows. In 1964, Motorola was the first U.S. corporation to set up an R&D unit in Israel. They developed the first wireless capabilities that are now in use and commonly, and also then developed a whole bunch of chips, including the 8088 chip, famous chip for Intel. Intel also set up. You look at, you sometimes have to swallow a pill, right? Which is, kind of, maybe, something, I don't know, half an inch, a little bigger. The PillCam miniature camera has a camera inside, and you swallow it, and it goes through your entire digestive system and gives measurements as well as physical viewing of what's going on inside. It's been so useful in diagnosing and treating gastrointestinal diseases. It revolutionized the GI diagnostics industry. The company was sold in 2013, that's 15 years after they started, for $860 million. That's pretty amazing. 1999, 2 Israelis launched something called Mobileye, which you probably haven't heard about. It revolutionized accident prevention in vehicles, something which has been the leader, and you'll see here in a moment. 18 years after this, in 2017, just last year, Intel acquired Mobileye for $15.3 billion. That's not a bad day's work, huh? 18 years. In the year 2000, an Israeli company called M Systems developed the first jump drive, that little flash drive that we all use to carry, copy stuff and take with you and all that, backup stuff. Yeah, that was developed by an Israeli company. In 2006, that Israeli company sold itself and its rights to it to a company called SanDisk, for $1.6 billion. In 2013, Israel led the world in preventing and treating all 4 main causes of preventable blindness. So they're not just interested in technology, they're interested in humanity as well. They have one of the most, that country is one of the most active in assisting places where there have been natural disasters, earthquakes and floods and all kinds of things. Israel is one of the first ones to come and help them out. And now, in this year, in 2018, I heard, because I'm kind of interested in this area, an Israeli astrophysicist by the name of Renan Bar Kana discovered the first direct proof of the existence of dark matter in the universe. Now, I don't know if how many of you are scientists and know anything about what is dark matter. Dark matter is material, matter, stuff that has had, because of gravitational effects, has imploded. So much so that even light can't get out of it. So the matter, this ball of matter, whatever you want to call it, this is so dense you can't see it. Well, then how do you know it's there? Here's how you know it's there. You can see the effects of other things that you can see revolving around it. And you're saying, what's it revolving around? Oh, there must be something which you and I have heard the words, a black hole, something. Do you know, just about every galaxy that's out there has that as its center, including the one that we're part of, the Milky Way galaxy. Anyway, this gentleman came up with a way of the first direct proof. Not that's indirect proof, saying there must be something there. He came up with a direct proof. Israel is now ranked the eighth most powerful nation in the world. If you look at a map, you look at a globe, can you even find Israel? That's the eighth most powerful one. It's the average life expectancy in Israel now is the 5th highest in the world. It's the 10th, it's ranked the 10th as most innovative country in the world. And the 11th, I love this one, the 11th overall happiest country in the world in which to live. I'd be curious to know where we rank. I never did look that up, but anyway. We're going to be closing. Our service is running a few minutes over, so you're probably getting hungry. But we're going to be closing with the Hatikvah. But before we do that, I have one more short video that I want you to see. This year, for the first time in my history that I know of, that I've ever heard of, the nation of Israel has been, because it's the 70th is a significant milestone to reach. It's kind of like a golden anniversary for our weddings and so on. 70th is a big one for Israel. The scripture actually talks about our time is 70 years. One of the Psalms makes mention of the fact that man's time on earth is 70 years, maybe 80 if he has the strength. Some of us hope to go beyond that. But they have asked for all the organizations that support Israel to sing the Hatikvah and record it and send it in to them. I want you to hear their request, and so we're going to play the video, and then we're all going to stand up and sing the Hatikvah together, and guess what? We're going to video it. But we'll see how we use it. Okay, so if you would just turn the lights out one more time. This is Israel's request that you sing your praises of the Hatikvah by singing the Hatikvah. Sing for us. After this.
"99 years ago, this song was briefly banned by the British. 74 years ago, Czech Jews spontaneously sung this song in defiance on the way to the gas chambers at Auschwitz. 73 years ago, Newly freed Jews in Bergen-Belsen sang this song through tears of joy and sorrow. 70 years ago, this song became the anthem of the state of Israel. Over the course of the past 70 years, Israel has persevered, overcoming 6 wars, 2 intifadas, and countless terrorist attacks, and now serves as sanctuary not only for its citizens, but for every Jew around the world. In fact, Israel hasn't just survived, it has thrived. So this year, to celebrate 70 years of triumph, we are asking people from 100 countries, crowds, choirs, cantors, anyone or everyone to sing Hatikva and show their solidarity with the great state of Israel. One magnificent video will be created from your submissions and presented to members of the Knesset as a birthday present from the diaspora. For Israel's 70th, let's all rejoice in harmony.
We're going to be singing this together, and I'm going to ask everybody to stand and sing. Wait a minute, before you do, I just want you to stand and sing in fortissimo. You know what that means? Loud, strong, okay? So this is what we want. We're going to have the children come forward, and we'll be singing the Hatikva. Remember, this is being recorded. Stand right here. Stand here. Right here in front. Come with the signs. Come here. Face the camera. Come. Stand in front of me. Stand.
להיות עמך